Get a deeper connection with the Cougars of BYU Sports.
God gives us a gift, and we use that gift until he takes it away.
Deep Blue.
Just sitting down afterward and being really tired and thinking like, wow, I just won the U.S. championship.
This is Deep Blue. Here's your host, Jason Shepard.
Thanks for tuning in for a new episode of Deep Blue. This is the show where we get to know the person behind the number that you see on the field or the court. These are the true stories of BYU athletes, and in today's case, fans from their own mouths. My guest today is teacher, motivational speaker, performer, writer, you know it, podcaster, which we're going to get into. The great John Bytheway is my guest. John, thank you so much for doing this.
Jason, you're so nice to invite me. And I've texted you before that I love hearing you call a baseball game. You get so excited, and then I get excited. And so I'm glad to be here with you, Jason.
Let's start here. You're on this podcast, but you are certainly not a stranger to podcasts. You're well known for co-hosting your own podcast, Follow Him. You do that with Hank Smith. And the idea is to start a Come Follow Me podcast. How did that get started for you?
Wow. It was all Steve Sorensen, and we always give a shout out to him on the program. He just had this idea, and he had me come down, speak to his, he was a YSA bishop, had a closer friendship with Hank, and was like, we should start a podcast, get some of these scholars on. And, I just feel so lucky to be involved, because I'm not a big scholar. I'm a scripture nerd for sure, but our secret sauce has been getting different guests that know, and I just have a blast. Mostly I sit there and nod thoughtfully, like I know something, but that was all Steve. And then Steve passed away kind of untimely, not very long after we started, but Shannon Sorensen, Steve's wife, says, let's keep this going. And it's been a huge blessing for me personally. I'm so glad Hank invited me, and we just have a blast. So thanks for asking.
You bet. Well, in podcasts, obviously there's always an evolution to media, and the podcast is, what is really big right now. And it's I don't want to say it's an easy way, but it's a way to be able to connect to a lot of people on their own time. Have you, I assume, obviously you continue to do it. I've assumed you've enjoyed this medium.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to put it, on their own time, because I'll talk to people that, I listen while I'm mowing the lawn. I listen while I'm driving. I walked into Macy's grocery store the other day, and somebody, I'm listening to you right now. How's this even possible? But it's pretty cool, because I like that, on their own time. And when I talk to kids about it, we used to have a Walkman, and then somebody invented an iPod, and I guess podcast came from that.
Yes.
Sounding like broadcast, but it's on my iPod, so we'll call it the podcast or something. But and then for people to be able to log in whenever they want and listen, yeah, I think you nailed it there, how it's on your own time.
Do you ever get into any BYU sports conversations, you and Hank, at all, or is it strictly no sports involved in the podcast?
Gosh, I don't think very often, but we'll talk, because we've had students, and I have other friends that I text that are fans, and so not very often, and it kind of dates things if you talk about it. And yet, when you're a fan like us, if you were to ask me what was your favorite BYU sports moment, I'd have to go back to 1990 and say I'm in the south end zone watching Miami at BYU in football. And that was the best game I ever saw in my life. That was so fun. So somebody like you and I, we can talk, and you'll remember that game, and it means something to us.
Well, and look, you've been able to witness a lot of BYU sports over your time as being a fan. And you mentioned, what what maybe your favorite moment is, but what are your thoughts on what's happening with BYU sports right now? I mean, John, times right now are very exciting to be a BYU sports fan.
It is so fun. It's so fun. And I think What happened to me, Jason, that really got me excited about that was I was hired as a part-time instructor. And it sounds funny if I say it the wrong way. It's a part-time religion instructor. Sounds like it's a part-time religion where, I get off my religion at 5, that doesn't sound right. So, but I had one in 2005. So we're going back is when I started, and I had David Nixon in that class. I had Brett Denny in that class. I had Jimmy Balderson in that class. I had Chris Bolden in that class. I had Mitch Payne in that class. These are all names that you know, right?
Of course.
And it was pretty cool because I had, to be honest, some football players before those guys. But, gosh, I have to be careful how I say this. Something happened when Bronco Mendenhall showed up because these guys came on time. They sat near the front. Who'd like to offer prayer? They offered prayers. They made comments. And I just thought, man, I love these guys. And I still keep in touch, like you, with David Nixon. And his sister, Emily, took my Book of Mormon class and married Taysom. So, it's once you get to know some of these guys, boy, that's when I really I could get behind these guys. And I love to see them succeed,
Well, and it's not just you being a fan of BYU. I mean, you were a student here. I mean, this is your alma mater. What was it like for you to be able to come back and teach here?
Well, that was kind of such a tender mercy because it was kind of an accident. I was walking down the hall in the JSB one day, and I saw Dr. Robert L. Millett. I don't know if you remember that name. He was the Dean of Religious Education. He's serving a mission now with his wife at Southern Virginia University. And he was walking down the hall. I said, "Hey, what should I do with my life?" And he's so funny. He said, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." And he said, "There is a new Masters of Religious Education here." And I had been teaching, but he says, if you intend to keep teaching, if you like teaching, why don't you take this? Oh my goodness, Jason, that was so fun. It was so amazing. Let me throw out the names of some of my professors. Joseph Fielding McConkey. You think he's a member?
I would say the lineage is probably pretty good there. Yeah.
And Robert J. Matthews, who the JST expert, wrote a lot of the Bible dictionary that we used to say. I mean, I'd go to that too. Just an amazing experience having these professors. And when I finished that, I wanted to continue to teach. So I'm not a professor. I don't have a PhD. My students will call me professor, and I'll just kind of, thank you. But they're pretty hyper about titles around here. In academic circles, I'm just a part-time guy, but I'm honored to be able to teach.
Well, you're a prolific writer, obviously an unbelievable speaker. And when I say you have a gift for being able to teach gospel principles, I want to underline the word gift, because the way that you're able to communicate, it is a gift. And the way that you're able to use humor to teach those gospel principles, how did you develop that skill? Or is that something that has always come natural to you?
Thank you for asking that. I served my mission in the Philippines, and my first companion, who passed away from a brain tumor, his name was Chuck Buchanan, and he said, "Hey, when you come home, come down to BYU and do EFY." And I was like, "What? What's FYI?" And no, that wasn't. I got home from my mission in the early 80s. I came down to BYU and started as a counselor there. And I remember watching one of these speakers. I had never seen anything like it. And do you know who it was? It was Brad Wilcox. And he was fun, and he was energetic, and he was delightful, and he was powerful. And I just thought, man, I could listen to him all day, And as time went on, I was a counselor for a few years, an administrator at EFY, and then I finished my degree in business. But I got invited to speak a couple of times, and I remember having a business policy class. I think it was business $399 probably. And Dr. Lambert, his first question every week, we'd have to read a 20 or 30 page case, right? His first question every week was, what is this business's distinctive competence? And I will never forget that question. And I remembered I was trying to learn to be a teacher. And that's a great way to approach this. What can I do? What is my distinctive competence? Because I don't want to copy somebody. I want to be me. What's my distinctive competence? And I'd always liked to do impersonations. I always liked humor. And I thought maybe that's what I can do. And I watched Brad Wilcox, and he's become a dear friend and everything. So anyway, that's kind of how that started. But I learned from some great other teachers, kind of some things that they did. And you can't really feign enthusiasm for the gospel. And I'm really grateful that I don't have to pretend to love talking about the gospel. I love it. It's really fun.
Well, and look, and I was telling you before we started the podcast, the first time that I had an opportunity to see you speak was when I was in high school, and it was an early morning devotional before school started. and I'll be honest with you, like, I can't remember specifically what was said, but what I remember was that I was entertained, but I was being entertained while being talked to about gospel principles, and we were learning more about the gospel and feeling the Spirit, but it was in an entertaining way. And I think that there are people that would not necessarily think that humor would be a good way to talk about the gospel, but it works. And my question is, why do you think it works?
I love what Elder Kieran has talked about recently about the Church of Joy, and I loved seeing how President Hinckley would joke once in a while and things like that, and how we ought to have some joy in this, and it ought to be joyful, and men is that he might have joy. And so it's interesting because you have to be careful. I don't want to be nothing but entertainment.
Right.
And if I'm nothing but gospel principles, I'll put everybody to sleep. And when you've got a group of teenagers who showed up like an awesome Jason Shepard at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning for one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, I marvel at these youth, because I still do those. These kids that come that early, I think, look at these guys. And so I remember just thinking if kids can sense that this is a joyous message and that we have, maybe that'll help. And it is, and it should be.
Yeah. You were telling me that this path that you got on, it was somewhat by accident a little bit. Tell everybody the story, how you kind of got on the radar for being able to do this and having this gift. This story is fantastic.
Oh, it was an accident. It wasn't my plan. My brother was a business major. I thought I'll be a business major. But I got home from my mission, as I told you. Elder Buchanan, Chuck Buchanan, was like, "Come and do EFY," and I went to the University of Utah for a year. I came down in the summer and did EFY, and these guys that were running, especially for youth, the older counselors, were all graduating. And so I applied for the head counselor job. I can't remember what we called it, and I got it. So I moved and I came down to BYU, and one of the greatest things ever happened to me. It was so much fun. I like I said, I watched Brad Wilcox and others teach. But long story short, when I graduated, I enjoyed working at BYU Continuing Education so much. They had another job open up there called Outreach Youth Conferences. I'm not even sure if they still do it, but we were kind of a resource to help stakes put on their youth conference. And we had a giant inflatable 6-foot ball. We called it an earth ball because some of them had a cover that looked like the planet Earth. Yeah. But basically it's a big beach ball. We'd run the outdoor games. We'd bring a couple of, seminary teachers with us, do some classes. And since it was expensive to bring people out, they'd say, "Well, you teach a class too." And I started teaching classes. Well, one time, this happened all the time, Jason, it was funny, but we'd bring our outdoor games with us, and then the weather would turn bad. or we didn't know the territory well enough. So we're in South Texas and we're like, hey, we're going to go out. Everybody lie down on the ground. They're like, no, there's fire ants. We're not going to do that. There's ticks, there's chiggers. We're like, So weather or whatever. One time I said, get me a guitar to somebody. And one of the adults had a guitar close by, and I entertained the kids in the gym with a couple of silly primary song parodies, and I just kept kind of growing that. And then one time I was in Thousand Oaks, California, and a dentist named Roger Zarenberg watched this and was like, hey, let's put that on a cassette. And it just never even entered my mind. People would listen to that. Yeah. But they put it on a cassette. It was called Bytheway, It's John. And somehow that got on Sherry Dew's radar. And she showed up one day at my office at BYU and said, what else you got? Well, I've been giving these talks at youth conferences. And so we started recording a couple of those. And then Sherry said, what else you got? And I said, well, I've always wanted to write a book for young people about how to make it through high school. And well, she said, well, we haven't really been able to do very well with books for teenagers. And I said, well, let me try. And so I did it. And I don't know, that just kind of took off from there. And so I expected a call every few weeks from Sherry. Okay, what else you got? Let me tell you, Sherry is a big-time BYU sports fan. We still text all the time about basketball and football. And did you see that? And where were you? And she's just awesome.
Isn't it funny? And this is really a theme that I've noticed in talking with a lot of people. The path that people get on, yes, sometimes it's planned. And this was always the plan. And they worked towards it and they made it happen. But I'm always amazed by the little things that happen in people's lives that you don't see coming, and it puts you on the path that you're meant to be on. And you cannot tell me that that is not the Lord's hand in our lives, helping us get to where we need to be. And that's a perfect example. You were made to do this. This was a calling for you, and for someone to just say, hey, oh, let's record this, and then let's give it to Sherry Dew. And then all of this, it just expands from that moment. I'm always fascinated by these stories like that.
Jason, when I was living at the Riviera at BYU, I hate to boast about my past apartment complexes, but I lived at the Riv. And I walked up to the Marriott Center to go to, there was some training meeting. I was in an Elders Quorum presidency at the Riviera, and Elder Neil A. Maxwell came. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
But he said the coolest thing. I have never seen it in writing, but he spoke of the plan of salvation. He called it the macro plan of salvation. And he said within the macro plan of salvation are millions of micro plans. And he said that God manages the intersections of our lives, and the people we meet and when we meet them. And that was such an intriguing idea. And what you just described to me was that, because when I talk about my first mission companion, I had a scholarship at the U. I live in Salt Lake City. But that little thing got me down there. It just opened up different things for me. And I have lots of family at the U. It's not about that. It's just about my plan, my micro plan. And I thought about that so often, Elder Maxwell saying each of us have a micro plan, and a micro plan of salvation. It's an intriguing idea.
So what part of the plan do you think it was for you to have such a spot-on Barney Fe impersonation?
When I was a kid, my brother and I would get home from school, and if we got our homework, we watched TV, and usually the Andy Griffith Show was on. And so, I was living at the Riv, and there was a guy there who said, I can impersonate Barney Fe. And he did it. And I can remember his name, but I'm not going to say it. And it wasn't that good. And I remember thinking, he doesn't sound like that. He sounds more like, and then I tried to do it, and I kind of went, oh my goodness, I sound like him. And then I looked in the mirror and I thought, I look like him. And that's not a compliment. And so I started, people now don't even know who he is. The kids think I'm having a medical issue if I do Barney Fife in front of him. So, but anyway, but you know who Barney Fife is.
I know who Barney Fife is. Absolutely. Yeah. I know who Don Knotts. And speaking of, okay, so we're going to take this a little further. So this past a couple months ago, so I'm in Morgantown, West Virginia with women's basketball. And I don't know that's where Don Knotts is from. I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's the birthplace of Don Knotts, but the hotel that we're staying at, it's right on this main road. And as the bus is pulling out, as we're going to practice one day, I notice it's Don Knotts, either Don Knotts Drive or Don Knotts. And I'm like, looking up, is he from here? And then I'm getting all this information about Don Knotts. And yes, he's from Morgantown, West Virginia. And so for a lot of our trip, we were driving on the street named after Don Knotts.
That is so cool. Well, that old Andy Griffith show, there'll never be another. He invented that character of Barney Fife, and I never get tired of that. It's so funny to me and so clever. But
and you are a founding member of the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club,
the Salt Lake City chapter.
Yes, the local chapter. Yes, yes. And how did that start?
I just read about it somewhere and thought I want to join that. And so I got my wife and my brother and his wife, and the four of us, we are the chapter.
When was the last time you watched an episode of Andy Griffith?
2 days ago.
Really?
Do you have Pluto TV?
I do. It's all, I do.
Yeah, it's just kind of a free, know. And so they have a whole Andy Griffith Show channel. It's just 24/7 Andy Griffith. And sometimes you just need to unwind, you have to go to Mayberry. So
that's right. All right, I can't think of a better place to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. We'll have more with our guest today, John. By the way, this is the Deep Blue Podcast on BYU Radio. Jason Shepard here, the host of the Deep Blue Podcast, and one of our other great BYU Radio podcasts is 2 Point Conversion, hosted by Connor Pay and Chase Roberts. These guys not only play football, but they love to share their insights and their testimony into the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And each week, those guys are going to discuss the Come Follow Me lesson from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You get to learn and you get to hear from two football players. You can't beat that, right? You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back. This is the Deep Blue Podcast here on BYU Radio. I am your host, Jason Shepard. So happy to be talking with John, Bytheway. And before the break, we were talking about his Barney Fife impression that he does. He's also the founding member of the local chapter of the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club. But you had another story about Don Knotts.
Well, it's interesting because a long time ago there was a Broadway play called No Time for Sergeants, and then they made a movie. And if anybody's familiar with that, you'll see a scene where Andy Griffith he's this bumbling kind of what's the word for it? This redneck from the South that joins the Army, and he goes in to take a test, and the doctor administering the test is Don Knotts. Yeah. And there's a scene where Don Knotts is the smart one, and Andy Griffith is the bumbling one, which is kind of a backwards from the way the Andy Griffith Show works out. And he administers this coordination test or something, and so those two met on Broadway. And the story is that I've heard is that a spinoff from the Danny Thomas Show. I know way too much about this. There was a spinoff from the Danny Thomas Show where Danny Thomas is driving through this hick town and he gets pulled over by the sheriff, Andy Griffith, right? And Don Knotts sees this episode and calls up Andy Griffith and says, "Don't you need a deputy?" And Andy Griffith is like, "That's a great idea. Why don't you come and be my deputy?" And so that's how he became the deputy of Mayberry on the Andy Griffith Show. So,
did you ever get to meet Don Knotts or Andy Griffith?
No, I met Goober. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, at a youth conference, and we had time to hang out at the mall before our flight. And I saw Goober. Let's see, his name is George Lindsay. The actor who played Goober was signing books called Mayberry Memories. And I went up and met him. and bought a book about Mayberry, but I would know way too much about this, but he's the only one I've ever met.
Gotcha. Well, look, here's how I'll transition. There are a lot of people that have never been to the state of Utah that think most of this towns, including Salt Lake City, is Mayberry. So let's go there. You've mentioned that you grew up in Salt Lake. So you've also mentioned that you started at the U, obviously ended up at BYU. You're a BYU fan. Did you grow up as a Utah fan and then switch, or have you always been a BYU fan from a sports perspective?
Yeah, from a sports perspective, most of my family went to the U. My parents graduated from the University of Utah. But my dad was always a BYU fan, and he always loved to see them succeed. And so we always watched the BYU games and everything. And then when I got home from my mission, because of that companion, I thought, well, yeah, maybe I will. I'll go down to the Y, and just, man, had so much fun. It's a little different. It's not a commuter school, and so some of the things that I just loved about BYU, and I'll be nice. I enjoyed them both, but I had, oh my goodness, intramural sports at BYU. I have heard stories about it's one of the biggest in the country. Do you know more about that, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, it's legit. It's big time. Yeah, there's no question about it.
It's so much fun. It's just grab your elders quorum and let's go play football. And we did. And this is so fun. They have referees. They have fields that are marked off, and we just go play and have a blast. And so I had so much fun. When I moved down, I was still doing EFY. And I taught at EFY for years. And that's when, Robert Millett was like, why don't you come and teach a Book of Mormon class? And I was like, well, they wouldn't want me. I'm just an EFY guy. And he said, no, they know who you are. All right. So I taught a class, and these PhDs kept showing up in the back of my class, and they would like nod thoughtfully, and they gave me 2 sections. And then another PhD showed up and they gave me 3 sections, and they can't give me 4. They'd have to give me benefits. So I'm part-time teacher. But what a blessing. I had so much fun doing that. So I've been teaching up at the Salt Lake Center, and I had a student named Jasmine Papinga, and I thought, well, she's got to be related, and so I started talking to her. She's Brady's daughter, and she's like, yeah, I want to be a sports reporter. And it's just so fun to see her pop up and, doing the BYU. And I'd come at the beginning of class, and we would just talk sports. And then we'd talk scriptures for an hour and a half, but we'd always talk about what was going on. And so what a blessing that's been. And it's fun to see Jasmine. I hope she's having a good time with you guys.
Yeah, we like having her around. She does a good job with the women's basketball and does some softball and whatnot as well. What role did sports play in your life growing up? Did you play sports growing up?
I did. I wasn't great, but I was thinking this morning, knowing we'd be talking about this, how grateful I am that my mom and dad signed me up for Little League, and I played probably more baseball than anything in Little League, but played a lot of baseball. And our teams back then were sponsored by local businesses. So I played for Utah Power and Light, which they don't call it that anymore. I played for Cheer Gasoline, which was a gas station up on the avenues in Salt Lake City. I played for Travel Desk. It was a travel agency. What was the other team I played for? And my brother Kendrick played, and just so many great experiences. In fact, I took a class at BYU, Jason, you'll love this. I saw a night class called How to Get Published. And a guy named Hart Wixom was teaching this class, and I thought, oh, that might be fun. And he talked about just write an article for the New Era. And I wrote an article about baseball for the New Era. It was published in May of '99. And you know how somebody throws something at you and says, think fast?
Right.
Well, I wrote this article called It's Better to Think First Than Think Fast. They changed the title of it. I liked my title better, but I mean, I'm just a kid. I'm 9, 10 years old. I'm out in left field swatting the gnats over my head. You know how they gather over your head?
Oh, yeah. It's annoying.
Anyway, And Coach Duran comes out of the dugout and just yells. His one word wake up was think. And what we were supposed to do was say, what do I do if the ball comes to me? Such a great, thought. And I'm like, okay, there's a guy in second base. There's one out. If the ball comes to me, I'll catch it. If it's on the ground, I'll throw probably to third, right? Well, this is all in the article, but I'm standing in left field, and the batter just smacks a line drive to me, but it's in front of me, so I'm running, and you know how it is. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the guy leave second base, and I'm like, he's not tagging up, right? And so I'm like, boom! I catch the ball, I wing it over to second base, and I'm just a kid, but I made a double play, and the coach comes out of the dugout, way to go, by the way, and I still remember that as a fun sports moment, but what I loved was the principle of think first.
Yeah.
What do I do if the ball comes to me? And I think it would have taken me an extra few seconds had I not in my mind, well, I'm going to just watch the runner. And so I wrote a little article about that in the New Era a long time ago.
Well, I think it's a principle that still to this day, is one that is lasting. And I think a lot of us, if we were to think first on how we're going to react before anything happens, I think that will help us along the way, continuing to make good decisions. And it kind of leads me into what I wanted to ask you next, because when you started teaching and giving firesides, obviously that was a different, it's a different time, it's a different generation, and your career has spanned a couple of different generations. So you've been able to deal with youth that have grown up with different struggles or different types of things in their lives that others maybe didn't have to deal with. How have you had to adapt your teaching based on the different generations?
Man, that is so true. When I was a kid in high school, I went to Highland High School. I went to the high school where the Judkins basketball players played.
Oh yeah.
And Mike Maxwell that played at BYU briefly. And I still go to games with his brother, Brent Maxwell, sometimes. But such a different time. And I wrote an article for the New Era once about a really bad magazine in the gutter, walking home one day from school, and how the scripture about, you won't be tempted beyond that which you're able kind of came to my mind. And I think, man, today, for me, that was my one encounter with that kind of stuff as a teenager. Today, this is a different world, and our teenagers are encountering stuff like that daily. It gets texted to you, and so how do you deal with that? And it's been nice to be able to, or maybe I should say, it's been a challenge to be able to say, how do you deal with your world? And now that we all carry these things around, one of the things is how do I teach the scriptures? Do I require everybody to bring paper scriptures? Well, what if they have it on an iPad or a tablet? Well, what are they going to use on their missions? I should just say, bring what they use on their missions. And now on your mission, you can take tablets and things. And so it's constantly being adaptable. But I love what the emphasis of the young men's and young women's program is the whole outcome is defined as become a lifelong disciple of Jesus Christ, right? And that means whether it's paper or printed, you're going to have a daily dose of spiritual infusion to help you just deal with things. And so those principles haven't changed, but boy, everything else has, because I use PowerPoint in every class now. Yeah. Before that, I was using clear overhead projector stuff.
We've spent so much time talking about you teaching other people's kids. What about teaching your own kids growing up? How much did you feel like you had a leg up a little bit with your own kids, or was that even more difficult within your own home?
In my own home, I have an awesome wife, and that helps tremendously. And I did feel the pressure of got to talk the talk. You can't just walk the walk, And then I have learned that they love to listen to other people too. And so my kids will listen to Hank Smith's kids listen to me. At least I've heard. Maybe he's just saying that to be nice. But I'm so grateful there's others out there that can reach him. And but some of my kids had not heard some of my talks and heard them, or their mother showed it to them, and they'll come back to me and say, tell us more about this. And so that's been fun. I just hope that I'm trying to do it right, and to make the gospel really part of our lives, and to also find joy in it.
I've got to assume that you have people coming up to you all the time, asking for advice. What can I do with my kids? When people ask you for advice like that, what do you typically say to them? Because I've got to imagine that because you've been so successful and people know who you are, they're like, well, this guy's got the answers. I'm having trouble with my kids and teaching them these gospel principles. What advice can you give me to help my own kids? I've got to assume that happens to you probably quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's always obviously the best learning is going to come from the home. We have a home-centered, church-supported gospel here, so obviously it's going to come from home. And one of the things that I try to practice is my kids have heard me repent during family prayer. I'm sorry I lost it today about this or that, and to make this is a way of life, and I mess up and I repent too, and I keep going, and that's what I want you to do too. And one of the things that we have done, and not everybody can do this, but it has, Jason, it has really made a difference, is we go in a retreat for General Conference. We go somewhere else. And we'll, if we can afford it, we'll get a Verbo or something. And we make General Conference a big deal. And then after each session, we'll assign somebody to stand up. Okay, what did Elder Karen talk about? What did you like about that one? Okay, what did Sister Smith talk about? Let's talk about that. And kids love it. They love General Conference. And I just look at my wife like, whew, and we hope we're doing it right. And, can I throw something else out right now that
Please.
helpful? Related back to sports.
Okay.
Is I heard that Trevin Nell had served his mission in Uruguay. Well, my fifth son, he was the captain of the wrestling team at Olympus. I had the cross country body. This kid's got a wrestling body. And he, I talked to Jerem Jordan, and said, hey, is there any way you think you might be able to get Trevin Nell's contact info for me? And he did, and I asked Trevin, hey, my son's going to Uruguay. Could you talk to him? And Trevin spent about a half an hour on the phone with Timothy. Do you know what that does for a dad, And his wife, Tatum, took Book of Mormon from me, so that was fun too. But to come full circle, when I can have other adults out there helping to teach my kids, I'm so grateful for that. Maybe they'll never listen to me, but knowing there's a Trevin Nell out there that loved his mission in Uruguay and could talk to my son about that. Or, there's a Tyler Haas that went to the Philippines. Watching a BYU football post game and having a player say, I'm going to bed so I can go to church.
Yep.
My kids just crack up at that sort of thing. And to feel like we're together in this, that's huge. It's not just dad,
Yeah, no, you're right. I think from the outside looking in, John, I know that a lot of times it is portrayed as a negative or a hurdle. But I got to tell you, and look, I can only speak for myself. I take a lot of comfort that there is an overlap at BYU in athletics and religion. That, the Lord does not want us to only be or to only use our religion and represent our religion on Sundays. We're expected to represent our religion and our beliefs every day of the week. So why wouldn't that also entail what we do for a living, or when we're on the football field or on the basketball court? I take a lot of comfort in the fact that there is an overlap of sports and religion. But again, I can only speak for myself. I think it is very much a positive, and I think one of the big reasons why so many people who are looking for that choose to come to BYU for their athletics, because they know they're going to get more than just the results on the field or the court.
You know, watching Kalani Sitake's devotional, wasn't that just amazing?
It's fantastic.
To have, what was the story he told that Vi Sikahema came to their school and saw this kid in the court? I mean, it brings me to tears. And it was Kalani.
Yeah.
Incredible. And I texted Vi, Elder Sikahema, right? I've run into him a couple times in the airport and just, thanked him for that wonderful story. And I told him about what Trevin Nell did for my son Timothy and how he's my favorite player now. And do you know what Vi said? What Elder Sikahema said? He's now my favorite player too. Just in that kind of thing where I can have a love for God and a love for the Savior and get out and compete in sports and put those together. And there's my son Timothy calling me right now from Uruguay, but the other kids will talk to him. Anyway, that idea is wonderful that we can do that and put those together. And I just thought Kalani's devotional was, I've never met Coach Sitake, but to hear that devotional is so good. And to be a well-rounded person, have God in your life, what a great place. And there's other places, and we know that.
Yes.
And we know players that go to other places, and I'm glad they're there representing the gospel wherever they go. More power to you. But what you're saying, yeah, I watched Coach Sitake, and I just thought that was great devotional.
Well, John, before we wrap things up, and again, thank you so much for being willing to do this. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. We know you got a lot on your plate right now. What's next? What do you think is next on the horizon for you?
Wow, that's a great question. We're still doing the podcast, which I thoroughly enjoy. I've got one more daughter at home, and she has watched her older siblings go on missions. I'm just so grateful for the missionary program of the church. And my oldest daughter, Ashley, went to Lyon, France, where another Haas went, I think.
Yeah, it's where TJ went.
Right. So, then my son went to Iceland, and then my daughter went to Tahiti, and then my son went to West Virginia, and where Barney Fe was born, right?
See, it all comes back. Home. It all comes back, John. It all comes back to Barney Fe and Don Knotts.
Yeah. So what a blessing to see all of that happen. And then so someday my wife and I want to go. That's next, but we're not empty nesters yet, but we'd like to go somewhere. I'd like to go. I wouldn't mind going back to the Philippines. I've maybe told too many cockroach stories, though. So my wife to go there. Where did you go, Jason?
Ohio. Yeah. So I was closer to your son in West Virginia.
In West Virginia.
Yeah.
I think part of Ohio might have been in that boundary. Were you in Cincinnati or Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you probably got to go to Kirtland and see
that was
that.
in my mission. Yes, it was.
And have you seen how that has changed over the years?
It's unbelievable. I mean, look, it's if you ever want to know, how modern day revelation just continues, all you have to do is look at some of these historical sites and what's happening to them right now.
And I think we should give a shout out to Steve Young and tell that Steve Young story about how the road got moved in Kirtland because of Steve Young. Don't you think? Do you know that story?
I've heard a little bit, but you probably know it better than I do.
Yeah, let me see so right by the Newell K. Whitney store, there used to be just a main thoroughfare there. And today it's just kind of a road the way it would have looked in, 1830 or whatever. But it was dangerous. Here's this really nice Newell K. Whitney store that's the original store, and this thoroughfare is there. I wonder if there's a way that we can move the road. And there's actually a YouTube of Steve Young telling the story. But it involves Steve Young is playing for the San Francisco 49ers. He and Joe Montana are walking off the field one day. Steve Young's tossing a football up and down. He's wearing a shirt that says Kirtland, Ohio on it. And I can't remember what it said underneath, something like City of Faith or something like that. And that gets to Sports Illustrated. And somebody brings it to the Kirtland Town Council. It was like, what? What's this? Steve Young's got a Kirtland, Ohio shirt. You got to watch the video because Steve Young tells the story. And then I believe as they're trying to have these meetings about moving the road. Do you know who Carl Anderson is?
I don't off the top of my head.
He's got to be in his 80s now, but he's probably he's like called Mr. Kirtland by some people, just kind of the expert on Kirtland. But he's having these meetings asking them if they can move the road. Well, hey, is there any way we could get a copy of that picture of Steve Young wearing the Kirtland shirt? And they get this big blow up poster and everything. And just based on that, and I'm not going to get the details of the story right, so you have to watch it. They're able to do it. They get it. And if you go to the Kirtland, Ohio Visitor Center, you will see a picture of Steve Young in his football jersey with Kirtland City of Faith on it in that T-shirt. And he tells the story talking about intersections of, I have dozens of T-shirts from here and there. I happened to put that one on that day when the Sports Illustrated guys were there. I'm walking off the field with Joe Montana, and they get a picture of him with Kirtland.
Hey, Steve Young winning Super Bowls and moving streets in Ohio.
And moving street, some people can move mountains, some can move streets.
Yes.
And they moved that so that they could continue building other things in Kirtland, like the Ashery, some of the other buildings that were there. It necessitated moving that road, and it happened. And there's a Steve Young connection to that, which is so funny.
There you go. Well, John, thank you so much for doing this. I know we've been trying to make this work for a while. So for you to be able to take the time to do this, it's a thrill for me. You're somebody I've always looked up to, and I've always enjoyed your talks and your firesides, and the fact that I hope I can call you a friend means everything to me. So thank you so much for being willing to do this.
Oh, absolutely. And I have, because I'm kind of obnoxious, because I started texting Jerem, and then I started texting Spencer Linton. And then one time I was at a baseball game and Dave McCann came walking out, started talking to me like, man, I love these guys. And so during games, I'm so obnoxious. I'll text them stuff. And then Sherry Dew will say, how's it going? And so there's a lot of people who just love seeing these young men and young women do so well and to represent the way they do. And so, if any of them are listening, just thanks for representing, and you inspire me, you inspire my kids, you inspire so many. I mean, look at cross country. What?
Yeah, I know.
Look at the Olympics. What? It's just so fun to see these guys and to feel like I haven't met them, but we have something that's in common that we feel strongly about. And it's so great. And I feel that with you, Jason. So thanks for being my friend.
Oh, I appreciate it. It is my pleasure. Thanks once again to my guest, John. By the way, my name is Jason Shepard. This episode was produced by Ben Hall. Deep Blue senior producer is Cleon Wall. You can download and subscribe to Deep Blue on all podcast platforms, or find all episodes on the BYU Radio app. Deep Blue is a production of BYU Radio.